We've been talking about the miracle of Jesus calming the storm in Mark chapter 4. And this Christmas month, even though the parable and the parable in Mark 4 of the soils and Jesus' miracle of calming that storm don't really connect at our first flush with Christmas, I think we definitely see something that's a theme in all the Bible. You may not know this, that the concept of water for a Hebrew mind was always chaotic, especially when you talked about the sea. The word in Hebrew for sea is a frightening term in all the Old Testament. Remember that Israel did not have a navy. They never had any kind of wayfaring, seafaring army or naval arm, which indicates something about the Sea of Galilee. Of course, it was a lake, but as we've indicated in previous times together, it could become a ravaging storm in a few seconds with the wind coming off the desert. So apparently something like that happened with these well-trained fishermen and their land-loving rabbi, Jesus, who was asleep in the bottom of the boat. But how can we connect that with Christmas? It seems to me that the whole story of creation is undone by our sin. So chaos, any kind of chaos in creation is an indication of what resulted from our rebellion. And Jesus, of course, came to us as a baby, a helpless, weak baby, into the middle of our chaos. Now, we did not know who he was at first. Nobody knew for sure. His mother Mary heard something about this Messiah from Gabriel, and his father heard as well. But nobody knew for sure what was going on. Now, we know, but they didn't know. And when you think about Jesus in his ministry, he's the creator that we rebelled against. He came as our creator and became a man, became a human being. He assumed our human nature. He entered into all the chaos we produced. So when you look at the Gospel of Mark with all the exploding gospel activities of Jesus, he explodes our self-imposed death, he explodes our self-imposed illnesses, he comes and delivers us from all of that. He teaches us in the middle of our lack of understanding. In chapter 4, we find this almost shocking story. He's just finished a pretty basic parable, seed in the ground, seeds either grow or they don't. And then all of a sudden, he moves to a place where he's saying nothing, he's asleep, and his disciples are in abject fear, which says to me, that most of us, if we're honest, are just like these disciples. We need someone to come from outside of our world to help us. When I was a teacher in Mississippi, one of my pastors, a dear friend of mine, told a story I've never forgotten. He said, I was driving down the road in my car, and I passed a fence post, and on the fence post was a turtle. He said, I stopped my car and pulled back, and sure enough, it was a turtle on the top of a fence post. And he thought to himself, how did that turtle ever get there? And secondly, how would that turtle ever get off? And from there, he and I would apply to say that most of us are just like that turtle. We're in the middle of a real difficulty if we face life for what it is. We can't handle things on our own. We try and we fail. But when Jesus comes, he comes like us to the middle of our issues to help us. So I'm very intrigued that Jesus, at this first really, I think, confrontative place with his disciples, and I always put myself in the boat, what would I be doing? What would I be saying? What would I be praying or screaming in that boat? He comes and says, I come to your storm. I come to the sea that you produced, the chaos that you produced. I didn't produce it, you produced it. But I want to wait, I will wait until you actually understand who I am. And that may be part of the problem for Christmas. You and I like to keep Jesus as a baby in a manger. You can kind of control him there. But when you and I realize what he says about himself, asleep, interestingly, asleep as a baby, if you will, asleep now as a rabbi in the bottom of a boat, in the middle of our chaos, as a human being, we have a radical question to ask, and that is, who is he to me? What can he do? What does he offer to do in my life? And that to me is the fundamental question for any human being. Every one of us says something about that to him. Either I don't need you, I don't want to know you, or I do need you, and I understand exactly who you are. Or at least I understand enough about who you are as the incarnate God to come to my chaos, and my life is full of chaos. Maybe you feel our country's full of chaos. There's a story that you'll read this month in the War Cry that I wrote about, and I won't regale you with the points again, but I met a man who I felt was not acting Christianly, and I was pretty judgmental. But the more we talked, I found that he was really more able to walk into the world with the marks of Jesus than I was. And that to me said something that I'll never forget in my whole life. Am I willing to let the world know that I love Jesus, the incarnate God, that I trust Jesus with all of my life, and that I'm willing to follow him because he's the only one who wants to deal with my chaos? That's a good point, I think, for all of us to remember as we look at the baby Jesus once again. He didn't stay a baby for long, and he's no longer a baby. He's moved out of that place of manger into every single situation in our lives. He's there. And if you need him, you and I must call to him. And when we call to him, he answers every time.